Hey, freaks and friends, welcome to day 23 of the 31 Days of October. The daily content continues with the 45 years of Halloween celebration. Today, we're taking a little journey over the river and through the woods. To grandmother's house we go. We are now in the requel era, which of course means we are taking a look at Halloween, the reboot. Let's go. Make sure to stab that subscribe button and slash that bell icon so you don't miss out on this daily Halloween content all through the month of October. Halloween premiered at TIFF on September 8th, 2018 and saw a wide release October 19th, 2018. The film was directed by David Gordon Green and written by Jeff Fradley, Danny McBride, and David Gordon Green. And the film stars Jamie Lee Curtis, Judy Greer, Andy Matichak, and Will Patton. David Gordon Green's Halloween is a direct sequel to the 1978 John Carpenter film, so we're picking up 40 years later. Essentially what happened at the end of the original film is Michael is captured shortly after being shot by Dr. Loomis. We'll find out a little more about that tomorrow. But Michael is taken back to Smith's Grove, and of course, it's that time of the year again, or that time in Myers' stay, where, hey, it's the night before Halloween. What better idea do we have than to transfer Michael to another facility? And he's accompanied by his new psychiatrist since the passing of Dr. Loomis. The bus ultimately crashes, and we see Laurie Strode is pretty much figuring, okay, I'm going to have to face this bastard down one more time. And she has spent the last 40 years more or less in Sarah Connor mode, because 3 of her friends were killed, and now Myers is coming back for her. That's the way she sees it. And she now has a daughter and a granddaughter, and there's kind of a fractured family relationship there, which is a pretty cool little thing to throw into the film. But essentially, Myers is coming home to trick-or-treat 40 years after he came home in 78 to trick-or-treat. So taking a look at characters, we of course have Laurie Strode, played once again by Jamie Lee Curtis. As said in the synopsis, she's basically been living a traumatized sort of existence over the last 40 years after surviving her run-in with Myers back in 78. She's kind of gone full sort of survivalist mode. She's got a shooting range and everything in her backyard. House isolated in the middle of the outback of Haddonfield there. And she's awaiting his return because she has that gut feeling that he came for me one time, but he's coming back again. This time they're not related, so there is no blood relation, even though there also wasn't when the film was wrote in 78. But she still has a feeling that there is that connection between her and Myers in some sort of prey and predator kind of way. And that's something that one of the characters in the film, Dr. Sartain, actually speculates on a little bit. I forget how he worded it, but it's the fear of being the prey keeps both of them alive, and that predatory state sort of keeps them both running. So that's a cool little thing there. But I do like the survivalist Laurie. I'm not as high on it as I was 5 years ago when this film came out. It was there for a while where I actually preferred this version of Laurie to H2O, but when you think about the amount of trauma she went through in 78, with the first film being the only canon one at this point, to be at this level doesn't make a whole lot of sense. If you had the 78 hospital massacre going on, sort of include that into the canon, that would make a little more sense for her character to be this way. Like, it would make more sense for her to be sort of in that H2O sort of mindset, but I didn't write this fucker, so I have no say on that. But I think Jamie Lee Curtis came back for a pretty good performance. Next up, we have Judy Greer playing Laurie's daughter Karen, who is pretty resentful of the sort of survivalist upbringing that she had, and she's trying to really move on from her mom's own trauma. And she sort of has that feeling, we realize at the end of the movie in the third act, that yeah, she sort of knows that it wasn't bullshit, but she's sort of trying to think the expression. She's trying to live in the blissful ignorance, really. And she's sort of rejecting her mother's lifestyle, and she's like, yeah, no, it's not going to happen. And Karen kind of comes off as an annoying character at first with that whole, oh no, Mom, the world is full of happiness, and fucking that it was kind of silly, but I think it was interesting for her character to sort of have that last second of, okay, this shit's about to get real, and all that little bit of training she had as a kid sort of activates, like, just in that last snap of the film, when she surprises Michael with the, I can't do it, gotcha, fucking that was pretty brilliant. I really did enjoy that there. And I think she has some pretty good growth in the next film. Then we have Andi Matichak playing Allison, who is going to be Karen's daughter, Laurie's granddaughter. She is like the only member of the family who really adores her grandmother. Because her grandmother, despite being an alcoholic, is still her grandmother at the end of the day. And the reason why I'm pushing that point is because, of course, that's what she says throughout the whole fucking film every time she refers to her. It's kind of annoying. I'm glad they fucking played that down later on. She's a character that has more potential than execution. Like, she had potential to be like the next Laurie Strode in a lot of ways. And in some ways she kind of did become that, just in terms of looking at the 78 film and this one, like looking at those as two isolated standalones. She did survive this little onslaught of her friends being murdered and having to deal with the trauma of that. I wish I had a little bit more to say on Allison in this one, but we don't really get a whole lot of her really until the second and third film here in this part of the franchise. One thing we do get is the little breakup scene with her and Cameron, which I think is handled interestingly when we get to Halloween Kills. Aside from that, there's not really a whole lot. I mean, she has some pretty cool moments, like when she goes and finds her friend Oscar dead, and the musical cue that we get there too when she ends up coming face to face with Myers. And I do like that when she's in the back of the squad car too, like with Myers sitting there and she's trying to fucking get out of that situation because Dr. Sartain has fucking gone off his rocker. And that'll lead us into Dr. Sartain real quick. Dr. Sartain is addressed by Laurie as being the new Loomis. That was a line I thought was pretty cool when this film was new. When I watched it a few hours ago, the line had kind of soured over the last 5 years. It just doesn't sit with me like it did before. I kind of get what they're doing there, like he is sort of the spiritual successor to Loomis. But Dr. Sartain is no Dr. Loomis. Laurie is no Dr. Loomis. And I find that she kind of takes that role on a little bit more so than he does. But Dr. Sartain is, of course, Myers' new psychiatrist, who is insistent on traveling with him. Spoilers, he sabotages the bus ride, and he basically wants to see Myers in the wild, because he has become so obsessed that he can't reach through to Michael behind the walls. So he figures if he gets that chance to see him in the wild, not too dissimilar from how Loomis was able to, he might get a better understanding on him. He's the one really behind the reunion of Myers and Laurie, which I thought was interesting. I like what they were doing with that. I don't like the way whenever he does turn and show his crazy side, stabs Will Patton. I thought that was okay. But him putting on the Myers mask, I thought that was kind of stupid. I get why he did it, but we didn't really need that. It was unnecessary. It was pretty stupid. It doesn't piss me off too much, but it's like, did we really have to do that? Really, guys? But fuck it, what can you do? But I think that his character had a lot of potential that was kind of wasted in one film. I think if they had gone into this one knowing that they were going to make a trilogy, or at least 2 films, I think it would have served a little bit better if Sartain wasn't killed off in this one, especially so quickly after turning heel. It would have been cool to sort of see this weird psycho switch going off and sort of the repercussions of that in a little more drawn out sort of stage. But that's just sort of how I feel about that. But Dr. Sartain, he had a pretty cool little arc, but I don't know, he just felt wasted. Let's take a look now at the man of the hour. We'll call him the man of the decades at this point. Michael fucking Myers. The man is back. We even get Nick Castle to come back for a brief stint in this film as the reflection of Myers. But throughout the whole of the film, he's played by James Jude Courtney, who I think brings back sort of that Castle-esque, almost even a bit of a Wilburian sort of portrayal of Myers. Such a pretentious way to say that, wasn't it? But the way James Jude Courtney plays Myers here definitely felt like he's taking the character back to basics. There's a couple points, though, where I feel like his walk seems a little off, and it's mostly in that one-shot scene. And it's just something about when he grabs the hammer and walks into the Miss Elrod lady-looking house. There was just something about his walk that felt just a tad bit off. I'm not sure if it was the way he had his hands or something, but something about it just seemed off. But otherwise, I have absolutely zero complaints with James Jude Courtney's performance here. I do like that we get to see an unmasked Myers, but it doesn't focus in too much on his face. Like, we get little glimpses here and there, and I think it does just enough to sort of keep that face in a veil and just sort of hide it from the viewer. I do also like, too, one small detail, if you kind of pause it at the right moment in the bathroom scene, I'm thinking is where it was, you could sort of see that Myers still has that lame eye from where the hanger got him. And you can also see in the very beginning, he's still got the little scar there from the knitting needle. But the eye, the fact that he has a lame eye, thank you, guys, for including that. Because you guys have heard already over the last couple weeks, bitching about the eyes in H2O especially. We don't see much of the eyes in the Thorn trilogy, save for the fucking, let me see, uncle, and Halloween 5, but anyway, back on track. James Jude Courtney plays Myers in a way that feels like it is very in vein with the 78, but he brings in this brutality that I feel is sort of like, it almost echoes 40 years of pent-up rage. But when we see him back in Haddonfield, he's burning off a lot of that pent-up rage. Like, he's already killed a few people, and the way he just goes about it, too, it's like, yeah, I gotta sort of get the gears going again. And it works a lot better, I think, in some ways, than the way he just kind of resumes his killing spree in Halloween 4, because, you know, coming out of the coma diet. But here, he's still being fed and shit, you know, but I don't know, something about the way, it's kind of hard to pinpoint it, because he has some of that Mystique 78 style going on, but there is some of that sort of Halloween 4, Halloween 6, hey, he's like our superhero, this is the guy we're here to see, really. And when we see him in action, we get some of that direct brutality, but we also get some of that off-screen corpse reveals, which I always think is pretty cool in the series. And then there's a great bit of fucking stalking, too. Not as well handled as it was, I feel, in 78, but there's a lot of things in that film that just cannot be topped in the series. The mask, I think, looks pretty damn cool, being that it's withered. We're not going to talk about the logistics of how the mask has survived over 40 years, how Dana and Aaron got a hold of it. We're just going to ignore that, because that'll make this video longer than it probably will be already. But the look of Myers here is definitely back to basics. They gave a fuck about the mask looking as close to 78 as possible. So for that, you gotta commend it and say fucking beautiful. And Myers is scary again. Like, the only times he wasn't really scary, I would say, would be Resurrection and H2O. Even if he does have moments in both of those films, like, this is Myers sort of back to that sort of, okay, this is a man to be fucking feared, because he can be everywhere, nowhere, and anywhere, all at the same time. And his kills are just fucking great, too. Myers, 10 out of 10 on this one. And taking a quick step into the secondary characters and lesser characters in the film, I just want to run by a few of them. We have Vicky, who's sort of like the Annie character in this film, where she's playing the best friend to Allison. She's babysitting a little foul-mouthed Julian. I love their chemistry there. I wouldn't mind if the film had actually been about those two, and I feel like a lot of people kind of have that sort of opinion. Of course, Vicky was a character we all knew was pretty fucked from the trailer. Thanks a lot, guys. But Vicky was a fun character, and I wouldn't have been mad if the film followed her a little bit more. And as much as I love Allison, I think Vicky would have made a pretty badass final girl. We have Cameron, who is going to be definitely just mostly mentioned in here. It's Allison's boyfriend, the son of Lonnie, so that's a beautiful little Easter egg right there. Perfect fan service. He also has sort of a bit of a heel turn when they go to the little Halloween dance at the school. He's fucking drinking and kissing on some other girl. Throws Allison's phone in the insert whatever you think that shit is below. He's kind of a dick, but, you know, kind of watching this one with the foresight of what happens in Halloween Kills, you can kind of see that he actually does feel bad for what he did. And on first viewing, you almost don't know, does he feel bad for himself, or does he genuinely feel bad? Like, I think he genuinely kind of felt bad about doing that. But you could see that he was remorseful. Also, Frank Hawkins. I can't believe that I oversaw this one. Frank Hawkins, played by Will Patton, is a character that I thought was pretty cool. He was one of the arresting officers on site for Myers back in 78. And we get a great deal more of that in Halloween Kills. You guys know what I'm talking about. But he's sort of still a smaller character in here, but being that he's Will Patton, he definitely had some higher billing. And he's a character that, I swear, I could have swore that he was the sheriff, but Sheriff Barker exists. Why he's still a deputy, who knows? Maybe it had something to do with the trauma that he did incur back in 78. And I noticed something interesting, too, whenever it was one of the officers in the car that are having their little fucking Tarantino-esque discussion there. One of them refers to Hawkins as an old burnout, and I'm thinking that might have something to do with sort of what happened back in 78. Like, that could have been something that caused him to sort of be held back by himself, and maybe by the powers that be, too, but we'll probably do something with character deep dives at a later point. But Hawkins is a pretty fun character to get behind. I remember when Sartain did the heel turn and sticks him, runs his ass over. I could have swore dude was finished. I can sort of justify him totally surviving because I played it back a couple times. It looked like when he got run over, that it was just his legs getting run over. Now, they probably should have been a little mangled to where he would have needed a wheelchair in Halloween Ends. Another character I want to call out real quick, too, is going to be Ray. Ray didn't do anything to piss me off too much. The peanut butter on my penis, that was kind of a stupid line there. I don't know, Ray was a harmless goofball. He was a bulb that was a little too dim for this world, but he's in a much better place now. R.I.P. Ray, but no justice for you. You're still kind of stupid. So Halloween 2018 is a film that in some ways does look like it's trying to bring back sort of that same feel that was present in the first three films, but at the same time it sort of feels like it's seriously trying to capture the whole feel that has been present throughout the franchise. And that could just be that it's a more modern film and it's only 5 years removed from now. I mean, at the time of this release and recording, we're only a few days removed from the 5th anniversary of this movie for all intents and purposes, but it's a film that I think definitely does capture pretty well that spooky season, that perfect October fall feel. There are some scenes where it definitely feels a little over-polished, but for the most part it does feel like it's in tow with what Halloween should be, and I think that's something that really plays to this film's benefit. And the music by John Carpenter, who is back, so in a lot of ways this movie is really the band getting back together. I mean, it's really John Carpenter, Nick Castle, Jamie Lee Curtis coming back, but just those three alone, it feels like, yeah, this is definitely Halloween, but the point about the music, it's definitely that return to form. It's like John Carpenter's back, and he's going to say, yeah, you know what? We're going to make a sonic statement here. And that's kind of the thing, too, that really got my hopes up on this film was Carpenter's involvement to any degree shows that he's like, yeah, I don't actually hate this one. It's not a piece of shit completely. So, the score that he does, along with his son Cody and then Daniel Davies, I think what they did with the Halloween score was pretty damn cool here. The Shape Stocks Allison cue is probably one of the standouts here, even if it is like a minute-long track. It's definitely one of the best pieces in the film. I like the way that the main theme is redone. It almost has that feeling of... It feels like it's heavier, and it almost sounds faster, but I think it's still played at like the same speed, but it just feels a little heavier here. I think that 40th anniversary probably has something to do with it. It's like, hey, we're here to make a fucking statement, so it's just got that extra fucking kick in the ass right there, you know? And that's something I thought was really cool, too, with the opening scene, with the whole say something, Michael, and just the slow build up there. All the other inmates are starting to fucking panic and freak out at the sight of the Myers mask. Michael's mostly pretty calm. You could see just barely a little bit of motion off him. And just that build up, say something, and then the score kicks in. We got the fucking decayed pumpkin there, and it sort of reforms to the old 78 one. Just the whole thing with that, and the way the score, of course, plays into it was just fucking magnificent. But the music throughout the whole film, I think, is pretty solid. It's par for the course, really, at this point. I feel like that's sort of a cheap thing to say, but it was worth kind of mentioning just a little bit, because with the Return of the King, you gotta fucking call it like it is there. And the tension, I kind of talked about that already with Myers. And the tension overall throughout this film, I think, is pretty good. There's one particular moment, and this piggybacks off of another scene earlier in the film, where this father and his son come across the bus crash. And this kid's probably like 13 to 15, somewhere in that little region there. When we see Myers kill that kid, like after a nice little tense scene there, there's a scene later during that one shot where we as an audience for a whole fucking 2 seconds question whether or not Myers is gonna kill a fucking infant in its crib. And that scene really had me on the edge there, because I'm watching this in the theater and I'm like, he can't, no. And he just fucking walks away, just leading to a slower death possibly, unless somebody got there in time, which is what I would hope would happen there. But you have that. I really like the motion light scene where Oscar's in the Elrod's yard and the motion sensor's going off, and you see Myers just kind of moving throughout the yard there. I thought that was pretty solid there. But this is one that, with a lot of the October feel, in some ways the way that the film looks and the way that it sounds, it definitely does harken back to that first 3 set of films there. And again, like I said, it definitely incorporates that feeling of the series as a whole, as it is kind of a celebration of that. But yeah, this was the first Halloween that I saw in theaters, and it was a hell of an experience, honestly. I went with my ex-girlfriend and my brother. He actually went to the Halloween movie this time, so that was pretty good. But I remember watching this, it felt like, even though I was there with them and there was it was a pretty crowded theater if I remember correctly, but there were several points where it just felt like I was the only one in there, because you could tell everyone else there was like kind of a casual horror fan. Like, it didn't feel like a Halloween crowd per se, but there were points there, like, again, that opening scene leading into the opening credits. Like, I felt like I was the only one who was just, like, hit real hard with that and just fucking clamoring over that. Like, my eyes were glued to this fucking screen there. And yeah, it was a hell of an experience. And it was a film that I remember really being hyped about, because it felt like, to me as a lifelong Halloween fan, that the franchise was finally getting sort of that wider recognition that I just felt was always sort of fleeting for it, where everyone that I went to school with was always all about Jason and Friday the 13th, which I love. But it felt like everyone I'd ever met and talked to was always like, oh, Michael Myers and Halloween, that ain't shit. It's all about Friday the 13th and Nightmare on Elm Street. Like, yeah, those are cool too, but fucking Halloween, bro, come on. But when this one was coming out, it felt like it was definitely getting its fair shake, and so much so now to the point where people are sick of it. I don't care. I still love it. I will not grow sick of it. Even if I get a little fatigued, I'm never going to be sick of the Halloween franchise. But how does this one sit for me 5 years after its release? Am I still high on it like I was when it came out? Or like when I first reviewed it? In some ways, yes. Like, the best way to compare it really would be with H2O, and this was something that was actually brought up by Nick over at the Lost River Drive-In. He did a comparison video for 2018 and H2O, and the thing there with that comparison, they both kind of serve the same purpose in the franchise, where they're sort of that picking up after these events. In a lot of ways, I think narratively this one is considerably weak in comparison. And this is coming from the guy who doesn't really care for H2O all that much. But this one is one that I would rather revisit and watch as opposed to that one. But narratively speaking, it doesn't feel like it really earns a lot of what it's trying to go for, especially with Laurie's PTSD. Like, I could understand her being fucked up in the head over what happened in 78, but with 78 being the only film that this one is going off of, it just feels like it's a bit much, really. Again, I said it earlier that the H2O Laurie would make a little more sense as a follow-up here. If they sort of just kind of pulled the brakes on Laurie's portrayal here, I think this one could have worked better. But now in the 5 years since the dust has settled with this film and the release of Kills and Ends, it's one that I feel is still a pretty damn serviceable Halloween film. I would still say it's probably in the top half, but it's not one that I like clamor over like, oh yeah, this one's fucking great. But I will say it is one that you can go into having not seen the original film, because it doesn't really ruin a whole lot of that. Sure, it's going to give you some spoilers, so when you go back and watch 78 after this, you're going to be like, okay, so that's what happened. But it definitely works as a nice entry point to the franchise for newer viewers. So that's one thing I can't take away from this film and gotta respect about it. But at the end of the day, guys, I think that the 2018 Halloween film is one that, again, it's a serviceable entry to the franchise. It's definitely a nice shot in the arm to get this franchise sort of back on track. Some people will say it did. Some people will say it fucking derailed it again. That's something we'll talk about later. But this is one that I think definitely brought Halloween back to the freaking zeitgeist of horror. And for that, you got to appreciate it. You can't really take that away from it, that it is sort of that wake-up call. It's definitely, in a lot of ways, the return to form that I felt Halloween 4 should have been. So in that regard, I'll say that this one more than did its job. And it's one that I will revisit every year. Of course, you guys know I'm pretty high on the Blumhouse trilogy as it stands, you know. So when it comes down to it, guys, I'm going to be giving Halloween 2018 4 gotcha motherfuckers out of 5. So that was my revisited review for Halloween 2018. That's going to be the final of the revisits, as I have yet to review Kills and Ends properly. But anyway, what did you guys think of the revisit? What do you guys think of the film? Let me know down below. And while you're down there, be sure to play with some of those little icon features down there. Hit that bell so you can stay tuned with the final week of the 31 Days of October. Go back and rewatch the other ones if you haven't watched them yet. And as always, I want to thank you, and I will see you guys tomorrow.